You know, I was thinking about this the other day when I was talking to a friend who was having a bit of a difficult time with one of her adult children. Nothing dramatic, just the sort of ongoing worry that never really goes away when you have children. Money worries, relationship worries, where they live, what they're doing, whether they're happy, whether they're coping. It never really ends. And I remember driving home afterwards and thinking, I've never had that worry in my life. And that's when I started thinking again about the decision not to have children. Because it wasn't something I drifted into, it was a decision. And at the time, it wasn't a particular popular decision. You have to remember, when I was in my 20s, the expectation was very clear. You got married, you had children. That was what people just did. It wasn't really presented as one option amongst many. It was presented as the path. And I remember people saying to me, you'll change your mind, or you'll regret it, or you'll be lonely, or who'll look after you when you're older? Those were the standard responses. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm not sure I want the day-to-day responsibility of looking after a small person for the next 20 plus years. I didn't think I had the patience for it. And more importantly, I didn't have the desire for it. And I think that's something people don't talk about very honestly. Not everyone actually wants to be a parent. Some people do because they genuinely want children. Some people do because it's expected. Some people do because it's what everyone else is doing. And some people do it because they never really question it. But wanting children and assuming you will have children are two different things. And I remember thinking, if I don't really want this, why would I do it? Because it's not something you can try and then change your mind. Once you have children, that's your life. That's the structure of your life for decades. And I think that's the thing people don't always think about. Having children is not just a lovely idea of a baby and a family. It's a complete life structure decision. It determines where you live. It determines your finances, your holidays, your social life, your weekends, your career decisions. It determines when you retire, how much money you have, your worries, responsibilities. How about Christmas? Basically, it determines everything. It's probably the single biggest life structure decision most people ever make. And yet a lot of people don't really treat it as a decision. They treat it as the default. And I think I just quietly decided that it wasn't the life I wanted. That doesn't mean it's the wrong life. It just wasn't the life I wanted. And now at 63, I can look back and see the consequences of that decision much more clearly. Because every big decision has consequences. There is no decision without trade-offs. If you have children, your life will be full in a particular way. Family, grandchildren maybe, busy Christmases, people visiting, people needing you, people calling you, a sense of being needed, a sense of family structure around you if you're lucky. But you also have ongoing worry, ongoing financial help sometimes, compromises about where you live, time, work. If you don't have children, your life is full in a different way. Yes, you have more control over your time. Excuse me. Definitely more control over your money and more control over where you live. More freedom to move, more freedom to travel, more freedom to design your life. Definitely more quiet and more independence. But also more responsibility for building your own social life and community, because it doesn't happen automatically through children and grandchildren. Christmas is very different. Holidays are different. Your house is quieter. Your life is quieter. And you are slightly outside the normal life path. And that's probably the biggest thing. You are outside the normal structure that most people and society want you to follow. When most people are talking about schools and university and grandchildren and helping their children buy houses, you're having different conversations. Your life structure is just different. But different doesn't automatically mean worse. It just means different. And I think one of the things I've noticed over the years is that there is no perfect life path. There is just the path you choose and the consequences that come with it. I look at some of my friends and their lives are completely built around their children and grandchildren, and they absolutely love it. Their houses are busy, their weekends are busy, Christmas is chaos, there are always people coming and going, and they wouldn't have it any other way. I also see some friends who are permanently worried about their children, their money problems, relationship problems, where they live, what they're doing, whether they're happy, whether they're coping. The worry never really stops. And I look at my life and it is quieter. It is more independent, more flexible, and I don't have those worries. But I also don't have grandchildren running around at Christmas. So again, trade off. I think the biggest mistake people make in life is thinking there is a right and a wrong path. There isn't. There are just different paths with different consequences. Marriage has a consequence. Staying single has a consequence. Having children has consequences. Not having children has consequences. Moving house has consequence. Staying where you are has consequence. Retiring early has consequence. Working longer has consequence. Life is basically a series of decisions and consequences. And the trick is not to find the perfect decision, because it doesn't exist. The trick is to understand the consequences and decide which set of consequences you are most comfortable living with. And when I look back now, I can honestly say I don't regret not having children. That doesn't mean I think it's the right decision for everyone. It just means it was the right decision for me. I think the important thing is that it was a decision. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't something that didn't happen. It wasn't something I drifted into. It was a decision about what kind of life I wanted and what kind of life I didn't want. And I think that's something we don't talk about enough, especially in the second half of life. A lot of people drift into big life outcomes without ever really deciding. Excuse me. They drift into careers, marriages, where they live, retirement, helping children financially, staying in a house that's too big. And they drift into working longer than they need to, and drift into lives they didn't deliberately design. And then later, they look back and realise most of their life decisions were actually just drift. And that's really why I built Second Bloom, because I realised most people are not actually making deliberate decisions about the second half of their life. They are drifting into it. And the second half of life is too long to drift through. If you're in your 50s or 60s, you might easily have another 20 or 30 years ahead of you. That's not a small amount of time. That's a very substantial part of your life. And I think the big question in the second half of life is not, what is the right life? The big question is, what kind of life do I actually want from here? And what decisions do I need to make to build that life deliberately instead of drifting into whatever happens? Because whether it's children, work, money, where you live, relationships, retirement, social life, community, health, time, independence, all of these things are not just things that happen. They are things that are shaped by decisions. And I think the earlier you realise that life is designed by decisions, not by age or luck or timing, the more control you have over what the second half of your life actually looks like. And that really is what I spend most of my time thinking about now. Not the past decisions, but the decisions from here forward. Because the second half of life is not just something that happens to you, it's something